sure you've got anecdotes galore, and then we'll turn it over to you for some questions as well. So, Josh, can you tell us, please, to start, where were you when you got the phone call saying, hey, would you like to work on this thing called The Baker's Wife?
Okay, I had just started out finishing my apprenticeship in the Press Agents Union, and I worked for this big PR firm, and I was assigned working on The Baker's Wife. We had an office in California, we had one in New York. So the California office handled the West Coast premiere of the show, and I did not get to see it or experience it until it finally got to Washington, D.C. And it was playing the 2,400-seat Kennedy Center Opera House. And I went to see a performance, and I would say the Kennedy Center was sparsely populated. The Baker's Wife, in fact, went down in history as the lowest grossing show in the history of the Kennedy Center. I don't know if that record has been broken yet. I want you to think of this as a boxing match, okay? In one corner, we have David Merrick, Broadway producer, Hello Dolly, Gypsy, Promises, Promises, Oliver, famous for firing people. In the opposite corner, Stephen Schwartz, composer, lyricist, who is riding high because he has two huge hits running at the same time, Godspell and Pippin. So they're both strong forces. And also, let's talk about Stephen Schwartz's agent, whose name was Shirley Bernstein. Famous because she was a great agent and because her brother was Leonard Bernstein, which sort of explains one of the reasons why Stephen Schwartz and Leonard Bernstein collaborated on Mass at the premiered the Kennedy Center. So we have two very strong forces here. This is the musical where David Merrick fired the leading man, who was Topol. Topol, who got an Oscar nomination for playing Tevye in the movie A Fiddler on the Roof. He fired the leading lady, he fired the director, he fired the choreographer, and to make matters even worse, Joe Melziner, the set designer, whose fame went all the way back to Guys and Dolls, dropped dead while they were building the set. So this was not a lucky show to start with. So we had these opposing forces, and it all came to a head with the number Meadowlark. Now, does everyone remember the number that they saw tonight? Okay? The Baker's Wife is about to leave her husband, and she stands at the edge of the stage, and she sings a very long song about wanting to leave and needing to leave. And David Merrick hated the song, just hated it. Stephen Schwartz absolutely loved it. So there was always a debate about not only should the song stay in the show, but how long the song was. You know, it is an allegory, and it does last 7 minutes, which is a long time for a song about somebody who's about to run away. I'm not playing sides with this, but okay. So it's a beautiful song. It has become the most famous song from The Baker's Wife since it first came out. It's now sung in every cabaret show you ever see. I mean, people, invariably the female artist comes out and says, "You've probably never heard this song before if you've never been to a cabaret in the past 50 years." But it's really, really popular. But in the context of the show, it did perhaps drag it down, though it does not stop the song from being wonderful. So David Merrick said, "We have to get rid of that meadowlark, even if I have to poison the bird seed." So at one performance, it was an evening performance, Patti LuPone comes to the edge of the stage to do the number, and there is total silence from the orchestra. And she doesn't know what to make of it. And she looks down at the conductor, and he says, "No music." Somehow, someone has removed the song Meadowlark from every piece of sheet music that the orchestra was going to use to play it. It is not there. Patti LuPone has no choice but to continue the show from the moment that number is over through the end of the show. Stephen Schwartz is furious. I mean, okay. And David Merrick, he was screaming like, "Get me that fucking Merrick and get Shirley Bernstein here." And by the way, Shirley Bernstein was one of the few agents that David Merrick actually liked. Okay, he was screaming and screaming, and David Merrick said, "Oh, I had nothing to do with it. Someone left the window open and the meadowlark flew away." He never, ever admitted that he had, in fact, asked to have the music removed. After a lot of wrangling and him never, ever admitting that he did it, the music was miraculously returned to the conductor and the song went back in the show. But then there were debates, so it was occasionally out of the show. And then it was back in the show. And one of the things about The Baker's Wife is there are so many myths about it. All I can say is that this is Josh's version of The Baker's Wife. If you ask Stephen Schwartz, he has his. Patti LuPone has hers, a whole chapter in her autobiography about the horrors of being in the show. Okay, so I come to Washington a second time, or maybe this was the third time, because Playbill had given us a very, very difficult problem. Because they were having money issues, and this was 1976, if anyone remembers how depressing New York was in 1976. And they were cutting the number of pages in the playbill, and they were going to be halving the number of bios that could be accommodated, which is to say, every bio in the playbill needed to be cut 50%. And I thought, this is not a happy cast. They are really miserable. The least I can do, I can do this over the phone, but it just seems so inhumane. So I took the train down to Washington and met with each of the cast members individually, all of whom screamed at me, "They have cut all my lines. They have ruined my reputation. I hate being in the show. I want the show to close. And the insult to injury is that you're now asking me to cut my bio in half." I said, "Well, I'm doing it because that's the new requirement to Playbill. I have nothing to do with it." So they reluctantly do it, but they were really, really angry. Now, there's a really personal part of this story that is kind of neat because I was so naive about the business at that time that I went to Washington and I did not charge David Merrick for my trip. I didn't charge for the train ticket or anything. I figured I could have done the whole thing by telephone. It was my choice to go in person. So I'll do it. I mean, it just seemed like the nicest thing to do. And why should I charge the production? So naive, And, but if there is a guiding light in our lives, 4 years later, David Merrick, by the way, produced no shows for 4 years after The Baker's Wife. This was a man who at one time would have like 6 shows running on Broadway simultaneously and some on the road, and for 4 years, nothing from David Merrick. And then one day, he asked me to do his next show. And the reason that he asked me to do that next show was because he still couldn't get over that I had paid for my own train ticket. Okay? And the show was 42nd Street. So there is a balance in life. The other thing is that I was back in Washington again, probably the middle of the final week. There is no one in the audience. It is just, I hope I'm not exaggerating to say, look around. It was about the same number of people that are here right now, except the theater sat 2,400 people. So, okay, it's an empty house, and they are totally non-responsive. David Merrick has a gigantic flop on his hands, and we are standing together in the wings. And he looks at me, he looks at the stage, and says, "Oh, are we having fun?" And I realize that is David Merrick in one sentence. He wants to have fun. He loved producing. It was an adventure for him. Yeah, flop hit. I mean, yes, there are auxiliary reasons why he had particular reason to be happy about this one. But just the fact that it became my credo for working in the theater and anything else I did in life, are we having fun? And hit or flop, I have used that as the barometer, and it works. And yes, you will hear other versions of The Baker's Wife where David Merrick comes over more of the villain. I was there to watch him be the villain. I can't make believe that I did not see him fire people. I could not tell you that I didn't see him being angry. But I don't think I've ever worked with a producer with the possible addition of Liz McCann, who loved producing in the theater so much. So that's The Baker's Wife in a nutshell. So, any questions?
Who has questions for Josh? And while we're waiting on questions, Josh, would you be so kind as to introduce this lovely gentleman?
I am so delighted to introduce Kurt Peterson, who played Dominique in the original production, who is still after, I think it's 46 years. Look at him, he's right over there, okay? Can you see him? Okay, he's still gorgeous. So, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Josh, and it's so great to have you as sort of the innkeeper of memories, you know, sort of the person who remembered who was there, number one, but who really has kept a lot either written down or in your mind, and has been able to share them with people, a lot of whom were not born at that time. So thank you, Josh, very much.
Thank you. Well,
First, if you don't mind my asking, is everything Josh saying pretty much lining up with what you remember? Or you have a different perspective being a cast member,
yeah, pretty much. You know, he had a different point of view, a different perspective on it. You know, probably more so than me, because being a cast member, you're always sort of concerned about yourself and your role, and your lines coming in or your lines going out, or your song coming in or your songs going out.
Yeah.
So,
Should you pack the dressing room, right?
Pardon?
Should you pack your dressing room?
Like, would you be fired at some point? That's always a fear.
Oh yeah. Well, it was a minefield, because left and right people were being fired. You know, there's one thing, I don't know if you told the story about the last day of rehearsal in Washington, where there was a lot of conflict going on. In the beginning, it was a lot between Patti and between Topol. Topol didn't want to be there. He loved his paycheck, but he wanted to play my role, not the Baker. So the director would always try to get him to put a pillow in, and he would throw the pillow out and open his shirt down to his waist. So he was unhappy the whole time. So and then he sort of took it out, and then Patti was, you know, they were at each other's throats backstage almost the whole time they were there. I got along well with mostly everybody because when I was on stage with Patti, it was very brief. We would sing a song. The scenes were very short. I would sing a song, she would sing a song, I'd run her off into the country, sing another song, and that was it. So we got along great. And there was a number that was rehearsed every day, I think, for 8 months. And thank God I wasn't in it. I remember sitting at the pool in St. Louis, having a cocktail, while they were up in the top floor rehearsing the bread number. They rehearsed the bread number every single day, I think, for 8 months. And I'm so glad I wasn't in it because I had a vacation.
I think everybody else in the cast is in that
Everyone
number.
was in the cast. Everyone. They couldn't get it right. I loved the bread number. They did. I thought, what, you got 2 weeks here or something like that? The bread number worked beautifully.
Yeah. One of the press stunt that I did in Washington was I found a baker who would make a loaf of bread the width of the Kennedy Center stage. And I always was coming up with stunts. And I had the whole cast behind it, clearly not you because you weren't in the number, but like in their costume and dancing, doing a kick with the bread. Bread line. Get it?
I forgot that. I wasn't there. That's wonderful. At least you didn't bring the camel.
Yeah, that was another show. Yeah. There were no camels in The Baker's Wife.
Josh, an off-topic Baker's Wife question, if I may ask, because
Sure.
I'm curious. What is the craziest stunt you've ever pulled off as a press agent?
Oh my God, it's maybe, well, both involve animals. One was having camels advertise Timbuktu starring Eartha Kitt. I'll try to make this really quick. Okay, it was. I got 2 camels, one for Eartha Kitt, one for Melba Moore, and Melba Moore did not show up that day, and Eartha was not pleased, and she said, "I am not riding down Broadway alone." Joshua, get up. And they put the camel down, and I got on its back, and Eartha Kitt and I rode down Broadway together on camels. What we don't do for art. The other one was Alice in Wonderland, directed by the great Eva Le Gallienne, who also played the White Queen, and Kate Burton, Richard Burton's daughter, played Alice. And it has a live pig on the stage, and that's all I had to hear. And I was able to get through Bill Berloni, who trained Sandy and Annie. We got baby pigs, and we had a pig audition, and Miss Le Gallienne, who was utterly and completely humorless, treated it. First I had to get her permission to do it, and she said, "An audition for pigs? Well, I need one anyway, so fine." So we auditioned, and she's looking at the pigs like it was a Miss America contest. and she's like, she walks them a little bit to see how they walk. Do they have comportment? Are they friendly? Okay. And she's taking each little pig, truly like a contestant in the Miss America contest, to see if they're, so she, if they will be suitable to perform 8 times a week on Broadway. And the photographer, the news crews, like shove a camera in her face and a microphone up to her mouth and say, "Well, who's going to train the pigs?" And she goes, "I will. They're easier to train than actors." But not with humor. I mean, she's like dead serious. And she finally picks one. And they say, "Well, why did you happen to pick this one?" And she goes, "Intelligent and attractive." And I thought, okay, fine. We're all having a great time with it. And that's how we got our pig.
I love that. Okay.
Did it have an understudy?
Yes, of course. Okay. Don't ever ask a press agent what came next, okay? Because little piglets grow really, really fast. So you had to get God forbid, the show only ran a week. So, but the pig was getting bigger and bigger, and Kate Burton couldn't lift it. So we'd have to get fresh. If it had run longer, we would have had to get a new pig. you know, and an understudy. Yes, but that's another press stunt.
Let me ask you again about The Baker's Wife, and how do you sell tickets to a sinking ship? How do you get people after?
You sell what's sellable, okay? And I think on this one, first of all, it's a very, very famous and beloved movie. It's also being produced by David Merrick, and his name above the title. One producer, one show above the title. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember that used to actually happen more than once. You know, not 55 producers above the title, one. Just David Merrick presents, okay? So he himself was a brand. And I think that, like in other cities, prior to us not coming to New York, Topol was a big sell. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe there was some interest in Patti LuPone, but she was certainly on the rise, but had not yet arrived. You know, and so you just take the best of what it is. And you say it's from the composer of, you know, Pippin and Godspell. Yay! It's by the author of Fiddler on the Roof. Yay! I mean, it's coming there with pretty great credentials. It didn't come together. But you know, I want to say something about your casting, because I think the show rises and falls on who plays Amabla the baker. And think about the fact that in 1952, they were talking about doing a musical of The Baker's Wife with Burt Lahr.
Oh, sure.
Interesting choice. And then about 20 years later, they talked about Zero Mostel. Again, a man who was capable of showing vulnerability. That they ended up with Topol, who was as alpha a man as possible. I mean, he was in the Israeli army. I mean, there is nothing charming or vulnerable about him. I mean, he has many qualities that are terrific, but those are not them. And then Paul Sorvino was the final one, and he was too young, and he tried just to be nice. And you know, he went into a show where everybody else was like in a beehive ready to sting because they were all so unhappy. So he was too young and too nice, and the casting tonight was just perfect.
Here, here.
Because it's having seen so many other people play it and not really hitting it, you know? I've seen it being done in people, I've seen 75%, I've seen 10%, but you know, to really hit the bullseye on this is hard. I mean, there's so many subtleties in it and congratulations on your direction, because where were you when we were at the Kennedy Center? Okay, I'm almost afraid to ask this question, but you weren't even born yet, were you? Not even born yet. It just goes right to my heart.
What are the questions for Josh, now that my ego is this big? Anything else? Josh,
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Not just as someone who's a press agent, was it David Merrick who made everybody wait with the news about Gower Champion?
Well, that's a very tricky question to ask me, because when David Merrick, the whole story is that when David Merrick asked me to be the press agent of 42nd Street, I had to turn him down because I had so many other shows that I was doing simultaneously. I thought to work with David Merrick on a big musical that was trying out of town when I had 4 biggies that were currently running, I thought that was just going to be madness. It would only be a matter of time when he'd fire me. So I turned him down and recommended somebody that he hired. The show opened and all that craziness happened. I was hearing about it secondhand. I was not at the opening. I've heard, as it ran for 8.5 years, so God knows I heard lots of versions of that story, but I wasn't around. And a few weeks after the show opened, at 7:30 in the morning, I got a call at home. How would you like to be the press agent of the biggest hit on Broadway? I'm thinking, this is either David Merrick or a friend of mine who I know impersonates David Merrick really well. And it was David Merrick. And he said, I fired so-and-so who he'd originally hired, and when can we meet? And we met that day. He hated meeting in his famous red office. He liked to meet at restaurants, and he would always look around to see if anybody was listening. And he would be I remember one meeting at Wienerwald, which was adjacent to the Winter Garden. I don't know if you ever, so there I am, surrounded by miles of plastic Edelweiss. And he lays out exactly what he wants for the publicity on 42nd Street. Very specifically what he wants and what he doesn't want. And that's how we functioned. And we loved coming up with stunts. That was our favorite thing to do together. He was famous for them, and I was like a sponge. I figured, it's David Merrick. I'll throw out an idea. If he doesn't like it, he'll just say, I don't like the idea. So it was okay. I got burned because shortly thereafter I worked with Harold Prince. And I figured, well, David Merrick's asking me my opinion, and God knows Yul Brynner used to ask my opinion. I'll just tell Hal Prince in my opinion. Wrong, okay? I was fired from that show after the first day of rehearsal. So, you learn.
Was it your idea to do the 8:30 curtain for 42nd Street? I thought that was genius.
Okay, I can't take credit. Okay. In the theater, most people, you just go, yes, that was my idea. Wasn't it brilliant? Okay? No, it was 8:15, and it was the poster and signs were, David Merrick is holding the curtain for you. And it was a great idea because people who couldn't get into other shows that were adjacent to it, like Phantom of the Opera was right across the street. If you were there at 5 of 8, and you couldn't get into Phantom of the Opera, well, there was 42nd Street, and David Merrick is holding the curtain for you.
Oh, yeah.
Not only that, but then it meant that they couldn't go up to TKTS and get a discount ticket. He sold them at full price. So he won both ways. So,
Very smart.
and it was Nancy Coyne and Sereno Coyne Advertising who came up with the idea. I can't,
And didn't they also say the latest show on Broadway? Wasn't that?
Somewhere, yes,
Yeah.
I think we did that too. Yeah, but somewhere, I think to understand David Merrick, a slight diversion on 42nd Street. There's usually a quote that you use on the posters because you can really only pick one. It's usually the one that gets replaced with Tony Award winner, best play. But until that happens, you go with the best quote you can find. And David Merrick's quote on the 42nd Street poster was, "The musical made in heaven." Now, just think about that in terms of the fact that Howard Champion died on opening night. It kind of made the show. So it was tongue-in-cheek. The people who got it and were offended. The people who didn't get it, that was fine too. But, he always had that little, to make things go. And that's rare.
What's your website, Josh?
Callmypublicist.com. Oh, yeah. Call my website, callmypublicist.com.
Once again, Josh has an amazing one-person show where he tells these stories plus much more. I would encourage you to go to the website, take a look at it. Josh, Kurt, thank you both so much for sharing your stories.